After watching the intense personal showdown between House Majority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Representative Mike Lawler unfold, one couldn't help but feel as though the long-standing question once posed by Rodney King, "Can't we all just get along?" had been answered in the most dramatic and discouraging way possible. The answer, clear as day, was no. What took place wasn't just a disagreement about a bill, nor was it a standard exchange of political differences. It was a raw, emotional confrontation that reflected the current state of American politics. Divided, hostile, and fueled by ego more than empathy. It began, as these things often do, with a seemingly routine press moment. Jeffries, the Democratic House Majority Leader from New York, was addressing reporters outside the Capitol, speaking about legislative gridlock and efforts to avert a looming government shutdown. The crowd of journalists stood tightly packed, cameras rolling, microphones raised high, recording every word. Jeffries was doing what he's known for, maintaining composure, articulating his party's stance, and delivering his message with confidence and precision. But beneath that calm surface, tension was brewing. Enter Mike Lawler, a Republican representative also from New York, known for his assertive personality and willingness to engage in direct confrontation. As Jeffries spoke, Lawler approached, expression firm, body language tense. His walk alone signaled that he wasn't there for a friendly chat. What followed was not a spontaneous misunderstanding, but rather the culmination of weeks of political frustration and ideological resentment. Lawler wanted to know why Jeffries wouldn't sign onto a bipartisan bill to reopen the federal government, an issue that had left thousands of workers anxious about their paychecks and countless federal programs hanging by a thread. The moment Lawler's voice cut through the air, the atmosphere shifted. Reporters who had been jotting down notes suddenly froze, sensing that something unusual was about to unfold. Jeffries turned toward Lawler, his face betraying a mixture of surprise and irritation. Lawler's tone was sharp but not immediately aggressive. He began by questioning Jeffries' refusal to support the legislation. Yet in politics, tone can escalate in seconds, and this time it did. What ensued was a 4-minute verbal crossfire that felt far longer than it actually was. There was no mutual respect, no attempt to listen or find middle ground. Instead, each man talked over the other, voices rising, frustration seeping through their words. It wasn't simply a policy dispute, it was personal. You could hear the disdain, the exasperation, and perhaps even a touch of contempt as they argued not just about governance, but about who was to blame for the dysfunction that had gripped Washington. Jeffries, typically controlled and composed, lost some of his usual calm. His hand gestures grew more pronounced. His voice became sharper. At one point, he leaned in and wagged his finger right at Lawler's chest, a physical manifestation of the deep division that has come to define modern politics. Lawler didn't back down either. He stood his ground, firing back with equal force, unwilling to yield an inch. Both men are from New York, and it showed, not just in their accents, but in their attitude. The exchange had the unmistakable energy of a street-level argument between two lifelong New Yorkers, full of quick retorts, clipped sentences, and stubborn pride. For onlookers, it was both captivating and unsettling. The confrontation captured the current American mood, a sense that dialogue has been replaced by combat, and that political disagreement is no longer about persuasion, but about dominance. Each man seemed to be speaking not just to the other, but to the cameras, to their respective bases, to the millions watching who already had their minds made up about who the hero or the villain was. As the shouting continued, it became clear that neither was interested in resolution. The argument spiraled into what felt like a symbolic representation of Congress itself. Two opposing forces locked in perpetual conflict, unable to move forward, unwilling to give ground. The content of their disagreement almost ceased to matter. It was the performance of disagreement that took center stage. The finger-pointing, the overlapping voices, the refusal to concede even a sliver of understanding. These were the hallmarks of a system where gridlock has become a way of life. When it was over, nothing tangible had been achieved. The government wasn't reopened. No compromise had been reached. No minds were changed. The two men simply walked away, still fuming, their aides swooping in to escort them in opposite directions. Reporters stood in stunned silence for a few moments before the usual frenzy of questions resumed. The confrontation had lasted only a few minutes, but its implications were far larger. What makes moments like this so striking isn't merely the spectacle. It's the deeper truth they reveal about the culture of politics today. Once upon a time, members of opposing parties could clash bitterly on the floor and then share a drink afterward. Debate was fierce, but it wasn't necessarily personal. There was still an underlying respect for the institution and for one another as public servants. But those days, it seems, are fading fast. Now politics has become theater, and every confrontation is a performance meant to feed the insatiable appetite of social media and partisan media outlets. Every argument is clipped, shared, retweeted, and weaponized for engagement. The exchange between Jeffries and Lawler wasn't just a clash of ideologies, it was content. Within minutes, clips were circulating on X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, with captions like "Jeffries destroys Lawler" or "Lawler stands up to Jeffries." In this new media landscape, nuance is the first casualty, yet behind the shouting lies something more troubling, a deep erosion of trust between parties and between people. Both Jeffries and Lawler, in their own ways, were products of this polarized era. Jeffries, who rose to prominence as a disciplined communicator for the Democratic Party, has built his reputation on being articulate, strategic, and steadfast in defending his caucus. Lawler, on the other hand, represents a faction of Republicans who see confrontation as a badge of authenticity, a way to show their constituents that they're not afraid to stand up to the opposition. Both are playing roles that their political environments demand. In this way, their confrontation wasn't just spontaneous, it was inevitable. The structure of American politics today almost ensures such moments will happen. With cable news amplifying division, social media rewarding outrage, and party leaders pressured to appease increasingly polarized voters, the incentive to collaborate has vanished. The system thrives on conflict because conflict gets attention, and attention translates to power. Still, watching the exchange was painful, not just because of what was said, but because of what it represented. The scene encapsulated the exhaustion of a nation tired of endless fighting, where compromise has become synonymous with weakness, and where public servants seem more interested in scoring points than solving problems. It wasn't merely business as usual, it was a reminder that the business itself might be broken. As Jeffries turned back to reporters after Lawler stormed off, his expression said it all. He tried to resume his statement, but his tone had shifted. You could sense the frustration lingering, the emotional residue of the altercation. He spoke about responsibility, about doing what's right for the American people, but his words felt heavy, almost weary. Perhaps he knew that even this confrontation, like so many before it, would change nothing. The government would still teeter on the brink of shutdown. The partisanship would continue. The headlines would fade and the cycle would repeat. Lawler, meanwhile, walked down the corridor surrounded by aides, visibly irritated but energized. For his supporters, he had done exactly what they wanted. He had challenged the establishment, spoken truth to power, refused to be silenced. In today's political climate, such moments can elevate a politician's profile overnight. Within hours, conservative media outlets were already praising him for holding Jeffries accountable. On the left, commentators mocked him for grandstanding. Both sides were missing the same point, that the entire exchange was less about policy and more about performance.